Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Leading conversations, awakening your authentic self for soul growth. And today is October 16. And very shortly we have a Venus Star Point, which this program is all about, which you've been hearing from many folks, but we have Planet Buzz with Dr. Laura Tad and Wendy Stacy from England. And I'll get into who she is in a moment after I just briefly say a little bit about the Venus Star Point in Libra. It's a 100-year cycle. It begins on the 22nd. And it's Venus in her own sign, and it supplants, well, that's one way to say it, but it replaces another 100-year cycle with a different ruler. So we're moving really into a Venus-oriented psychology as a point of a heart-centered focus, where instead of Scorpio, ruled by both Mars and Pluto, which serves many purposes of regeneration and direction, but has its shadow side as all, we are now introducing in its stead Venus. But these two planets, I want to say immediately, just prior to this great conjunction on the 22nd of October, shortly, on the 18th, are trine. That means 120 degrees, and it's an ease, it's a flow. The energies just go. And hey, in mythology, they had a child, Harmonia. So I think my own take on this is that regardless of where the next 100 years goes in this depth, which always, when you start focusing deeper and deeper with all the many changes, and is that harmonizing, we'll learn new stratas of how to find harmonia. Okay, that's enough of me, because collectively we're very strong, and I am ready for Planet Buzz.
Focusing on planetary ecliptic orbital cycles and planetary pairs called synodic cycles connecting the planets at the same degree that begin our relationship, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, the founder of Talk Cosmos, an eclectic evolutionary astrologer, consultant, certified color energy life coach, vice president of the Washington State Astrological Association, member of Kepler Astrology Toastmaster Club, of a Dwarf Planet University diploma and AA with music degree. I love mythology, philosophizing, collaboration. I'm an artist, writer, a perpetual student of life.
And I'm Dr. Laura Tad. I work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with students and clients around the world. As a counselor, writer, and educator, I love helping people recognize their inner strength, take advantage of auspicious moments, and navigate times of challenge with greater ease. On my own podcast, Mythic Sky Storytime, I discuss astrology, mythology, and actualizing our full potential. Holding a PhD in human science, my doctoral thesis, titled Guided by Celestial Light in a World of Artificial Illumination, explores the lived experience of contemporary Western astrologers. In addition to my astrological work, I have a course in personal mythology that explores the stories we carry from our ancestors and the impact those narratives have on our lives.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
And we're not ended there, because to introduce our wonderful guest, Wendy Stacy. She's the principal of the International Mayo School of Astrology and the chair of the Astrological Association of Great Britain. And Wendy is an author. She has written numerous articles for the Astrological Journal. She's the author of Consulting with Astrology, Uranus Square Pluto, those were in 2012, COVID-19 Through the Microscopic Lens of Astrology, that was this year, and Unaspected Planets, which was also this year. Wendy has contributed to The New Generation, The Professional Astrologer, Bitcoin, And in 2014, Wendy Stacy received the prestigious Charles Harvey Award for exceptional service to astrology. And last but not least, which is something I intend to do myself, Wendy runs a free webinar on current affairs every fortnight. Now that's 2 weeks, Thursday nights, UK time. So that's a possibility. And people can register for that. And that information is mayoastrology.com/astrology-webinars. But all of that is on Talk Cosmos under this specific date. And I believe it's also with her bio. Or if you just Google Wendy Stacy, you're going to find all of this on her bio. Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's great to be back.
Lovely
Yeah.
to be here. Thank you, Sue.
Yes, last time, Wendy, we had Israel Ohosi and
Yes.
you, April 10th. And it was about the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which interestingly, Jupiter is now trailing to repeat that Piscean experience. But here we have another powerful conjunction with Venus and Libra. What am I saying? Venus and the Sun and Libra. Go ahead. I know, Lori, you have something on your brain here.
Well, I think maybe because what we're talking about is such a specific thing, right? That we're talking about a conjunction, but that it's Cassini, right? Because there's lots of us who I have Venus conjunct the Sun, but it's not Cassini, it's not a star point. And it's in a different sign than my Venus star point. So maybe to frame this for folks, really giving them some definition about what we're talking about. And I don't know if the slide, Sue, would be helpful.
Yeah, let's try the one I have. And Wendy, Nathan said that we can interchange. So that if you want to bring one, this is going to be fun. Okay, so the next one is, okay, if I can use the right thing, it would help. Okay, here we are. A Venus star point generally, and we know that we have a podcast, so hopefully we will not just rely on our YouTube. But if you have a chance, go to the YouTube because you can pause it, and we're not so educational as meaningfulness, but there is a lot to understand. So it's an 8-year cycle, but it spans over 100 years, and they reconnect at the same point in that same sign, moving, as Wendy's slide will show, a couple of degrees, starting from the full 29 back to 0. So meanwhile, in those 8 years, it has 5 different signs that it's having a pattern with, and that's called a Venus star point or a rose. And it looks like this gorgeous rose. And essentially, you can see the 5 Venus star points. They are, as of this very moment, on the 16th, we still have Scorpio, which was 3 degrees Scorpio back in 2018. But very shortly, on the 22nd, that's going to be history, and it'll be 29 degrees of Libra. So if that is something in your chart specifically, that's going to resonate. These points sit there like a back frame. It's a lot to understand. Ariel Gutman is a wonderful guide. There's many YouTubes going around at this moment too, and her Venus star rising. But these 5 points, which are in Libra and will be in Aries and in, well, I'm not saying them systematically, Capricorn, Leo, and Gemini. So we can go back to that. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about this. Go ahead. We can bail out of that.
Well, I think, what's interesting to be looking at is because there is this huge shift that's happening. So what we're looking at, what Ariel unpacked or stumbled upon in her research, right, was that looking at these exact conjunctions of Venus, that there's these very long cycles that end up showing up. And we are just in this next few days shifting into a period of time that no one on the planet has ever experienced. No one alive today was alive for the last Venus Sun star point in Libra. because it's 150 years ago was the last time they were conjunct. So we're looking at this global shift, in addition to however it lands for you in your own chart. For those of you who know your own chart well enough to know where 29 degrees Libra is going to fall, there is this collective shift that we are entering into. We do get a little bit of the Scorpio has a little bit of time to finish up still. 2026 is when we're officially is the last one. But when you're talking about 150-year cycles, it's sort of like when people talk about, oh, the age of Aquarius. When you're talking about 2,500-year cycles, if you're off by a decade, it's still pretty close.
Yeah.
And so looking at that, Libra as an archetype being very tied to Venus, and this, about beauty, about equanimity, about fairness, and so starting to see, and I think just like particularly with the outer planets, major transits, they tend to announce themselves, right? That what's the mundane, the global shift isn't like, oh, on the day it all changes.
No,
there does tend to, I think what we're seeing happen in Iran is very much a representation of this Cassimi that we're headed towards.
Yes, rebalancing polarized extremes. It's
been led by women. And
well, true. That. And Wendy, I want to make sure that if you can bring in any of your presentations also, it's going to be a bit of a juggle here between all of it, but
that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting as you were talking, Laura, as well. I was thinking, when we look at mundane cycles, I love how you said announce themselves, because that's what they do. Or Laura, you said, sorry. But, I'm just reminded that, we're just sort of entered into the air, 2 centuries of air with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that started in December 2020. But that announced itself in 1980-81 when Jupiter-Saturn conjoined in Libra. And all those things that Libra, and I'm just reminded of things like gay rights, de facto living together rights, divorce becoming more normalized, all these relationship issues. I'm just sort of in my head now thinking that these were all, I mean, I remember in 1981, Kramer versus Kramer won the Oscar for that year. And it was very symbolic of relationships, changing relationships, which changing families as well, nuclear families. So we were introduced, and this is going to build on that as well. I think all these similar issues, and
that may even be part of the thread to Iran, because the late 70s, 80s, that's when, I have a friend who was fled. His mom was Canadian, so they were able to get out. But 82, they fled Iran. Because that's when the revolution there happened, and stuff shifted in the way that now people are rebelling against. So there may be a tie to, just archetypally, we're seeing that being repeated now.
Yeah. It is very fascinating. I'm wondering, just as far as going ahead here, if we should bring in a chart to show. And now, Nathan, can you bring up the slides again? I know Wendy can do hers, but okay, because I have to. There's the 5, but here, the 150 years that Laura was mentioning. And I noticed that Ariel was mentioning that music. I started to think, of course, Libra has a lot to do about art and music. So I started Googling. Well, the camera really became very powerful during that time. And it's talking about relationships. I'll stick with that. It democratized, I can't even say the word, but made painting, because you could take a picture. There was more of a liberty. In fact, some of the artists said it's dead, because, interestingly, and the other half said it's free. Art is free now, which is showing the extreme of also entering in when we try to repolarize anything or new, wherever this is going to lead us. We know we're technology. There's a lot of technology, but in that birth of the tides coming in and out, there's going to be different extreme attitudes. But Great Britain, with the Industrial Revolution that had started prior, really updated their spinning and weaving, which changed textiles, because we're looking from 1771 to 1880. That's when Uranus was discovered, just shortly after, and then also Neptune. So our relationship with the universe changed. And music, gorgeous music. And of course, there were democracies, the USA, France, and many others that are still happening.
It's interesting you say so too. Just remind, like in 1842, there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. It was either in that or the 20s in Taurus, at the other Venusian sign. And that is the first time landscape was painted.
Yes.
So when it was in Taurus, the landscape, I mean, I was watching the British painting show and they were talking about when this started. I thought, that's Jupiter, Saturn, and Taurus. So I think when it goes into Libra, you're going to find more different genres of people, portraits, who's painting what, like, I don't know, self-portraits, I'm not sure, or that same polarity with Aries Libra, like painting other people, or relationships, painting people in different ways, maybe, perhaps.
Oh, it's exciting. Yeah. I love this. And I was thinking strongly, because here too, it correlated with the move out west. And so all these painters came and made huge, great big landscapes. Yeah. So in England too. Yeah, that's exciting. So here we have the bi-wheel of the two, if we're ready to do that, one of the bi-wheels. But actually, I don't know if this is a little premature, because we haven't, maybe not. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much to unpack here, because it's when I pulled it up, I was like, oh, it's not just the Venus Star Point. Wow. Okay. There's lots of returns happening. But also one thing that, and even though as I had said, like, oh, stuff announces themselves, it is also really interesting to see what happens just as it's occurring. Because when I was looking at the date of October 23rd, 1771, I don't know, coincidentally, or, the kismet perfection of it all, Mozart had a opera that was performed for the first time on the 15th or the 17th of October, 1771, that was about the wedding of one of Venus's sons to a nymph. And it premiered just as this conjunction was happening.
Oh, wow. Wonderful.
And so it is some of those, like the perfection of it. It's like, right, yeah, they announced themselves, but that was 10 days out, not even. And so that, that laying some of the groundwork and all the music he was young. I mean, Mozart was composing at 5. So that piece of the tie to the Venusian piece of music. And
beautiful.
And
absolutely.
What was coming out of, the classical music that was really sort of the heyday of all of the pieces. There's contemporary classical musicians now, but everybody we look to as sort of the benchmarks, right? That are the Mozart's, Beethoven's, Chopin, like all of that was this period.
Tremendous.
That 29 Libra is very elegant and sophisticated, isn't it? So I hope there may be a return to that sort of genre too, Laura. I think that's it's a very beautiful position. 29 Libra. It's desperate to be elegant and so yeah, mate, I can't wait till the new genres of music come forward and the climate we're living in, because it's very exciting, isn't it? Yeah.
And it will be very eclectic, very likely. I mean, having played music, I know that the different rhythms, there was always some marriage between, but so many different instruments, so many different ways to connect. In this chart, and for folks, this is going back on the 23rd of October, 1771, and this is UT, Universal Time, and it's an Aries chart, meaning that, okay, it's universal time, so it's 6 o'clock in the morning with 8 minutes and 9 seconds, to be exact. However, the chart is presented as an Aries chart, meaning that we're using the natural signs. So because we're talking already between England and the US, and I'm halfway across the ocean, so we're spreading our, so on an archetypal basis, there is such amazing changes in this particular chart. Immediately, there's a couple of oppositions, which always means greater awareness, and that's between Saturn and Neptune. Well, it's a little wide for Neptune. But there's that and what am I saying? That's with maybe the big scan of things with Neptune and as we know, there's this tension between old and new that's being represented by Saturn and Uranus. And here we have that Saturn part looking perhaps across the span
Well, it's
of
really,
150
it's more of a
years.
Saturn, right? So Saturn, it's a 10-degree orb, 9-degree orb, but Saturn was in 1771, Saturn was in Leo. We currently have it in Aquarius. So just by sign, they're in opposition and just shy of a Pluto return. I mean,
Ariel Gutman always refers to this because it's a 250-year cycle for the stars to move on, in a 1250-year cycle, because it's 250 times 5, to go completely round. But she correlates it with the 250 with almost the Pluto return, which is 244 to 248 years. So it's an interesting, which will come out of orb over some time. But it's interesting. This one also squares Pluto, this particular Venus point. So that's going to be an undercurrent to this as well, I think.
Absolutely.
A bit like the last one, because it was also. Pluto had changed signs or was changing signs
Which
as well.
That is so pertinent, because if we're just trying to make this into a broader terms for folks, and to answer but if we have that tension between this new ideal that we will be experiencing in all its depth, because Venus herself, I think, has been misrepresented as more of a certain terms, whereas actually he has a huge legacy of all this other mythology that goes down to the underground and sheds, and which is a natural process of finding your values, let's just say, and relating with other people. But if in that tension of that transformation with Pluto, as you indicate, Wendy, 29 degrees, we both of them are, well, they're at the very ends of their cardinal signs that want action. Because what I'm getting at is that transformation immediately is referring back to what structures we have, because it's Saturn. And Saturn is looking at 150 years ago to see what was there then anyway, so that's a very pertinent. But then in that Uranus of change is at the same degree. So there's huge change, but we're heading to it rather than letting go of it because of the nodal energies. I hope I've related.
Well, and I think, some of that we're seeing again, so when it happened in the 1700s, right, it was on the cusp of the U.S. Revolutionary War with Britain, and then a decade later, France. And but so much of that was about equity, about what was just, about fairness, about who, trying to, that being upended, and that being part of what we're seeing now too, of what's fair.
But on different terms, it's
sure
true. But it is interesting, because at that time, if we had the powers, let's say the leadership, if we look at, leadership is, I'm thinking archetypally with Saturn, of rules, of authority. It's in the sign of Leo, which is your own manifestation, and people wanted to manifest. Now it's in the collective.
Or it was the king, and it was monarchy versus
one. Whereas England too is democracy. There's this, the Commonwealth has, and I can be corrected, I hope, for sure, has this reverence of that, but it doesn't rule them. It's more of a subtle
today. But in the 1700s,
right? No, that's what
it was
I'm
the
talking
king
about.
in both Britain and France.
Yeah, but because Jupiter is very evident. Jupiter here is at 0 degrees. Is it as I first mentioned, it's now at 0 degrees Aries because it's returning back to Pisces, but it is at that Aries point, and it's looking, when it's retrograde, always to lost opportunities. Whereas before, Jupiter was conjunct that transformational energy. Really, it's quite different.
And
I
also
think.
perhaps, because you put on the industrialization and the spinning jenny in 1776, I think the spinning jenny was invented. The Chinese had done it many hundreds of years before, and I'm wondering if it was on a Sun, Venus, and Libra star as well, perhaps. And when that happened, and Pluto was at the end of Capricorn, and so maybe with that same sort of pattern, and it was the start of the Industrial Revolution and manufacturing, to the point that we all live by that sort of same sort of system now, the same sort of economic system. So it sort of has a similar signature, I think. So it still has that end of Capricorn industrial, change of industrialization or change of commerce, change of all things economic, really, but tied into that Sun Venus, which is all about people. I think people, relationships, and cooperation and different forms of it, and
Yes.
collaboration and different forms of it. Yeah.
And the wound, I immediately see that Chiron is at the very end of this collective in Pisces, which we could say so much. We're in the era of Pisces, we're going into Aquarius. But here in this chart, as it has been for 8 years, it's in the middle of it. It's right in the middle of Aries. So it's really that initiation. And it's looking at Mars. But the difference is great. Mars right now is in that diversity. In Gemini, it wants connection. It wants the neighborhood. It wants to find out more information. It wants to communicate. Should we do another slide, or does somebody have?
Well, should we take a break? Nathan
Well,
just
we
popped
will.
up that.
Oh dear. Okay, very good. All right. Thank you. We will certainly. We'll come back and we'll squeeze in more with Dr. Laura Tad and Wendy Stacey of the UK Mayo School of Astrology. And this is the 16th, just before the great Libra Venus Star Point. It'll be like being in the game rather than speculating about it. Okay, be back. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Libra, ruled dually by Venus. By leaving the lower hemisphere of the self, the energy of Libra enters the arena where the completed self meets the other than self to form a relationship based on partnership. As a cardinal air sign on the descendant angle, represented by the equinox of equal light, Libra's energy learns through comparison and relationships, with the intention to integrate duality and polarities.
This is Martha Norwalk, every Sunday morning beginning at 9 a.m. Thanks in part to Linda Rasmussen at Vertical Energy Worldwide, we cover the world of animals. This week, October 23rd, it's my next teaching show with Walter Stoffel, author of Lance, A Spirit Unbroken. I'll pick up where I left off in August, so check out our archives if you need to catch up. Hope you can join us for Martha Norwalk's Animal World Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Talk Cosmos brings you leading-edge astrological conversations with hour-long programs each week on KKNW. The show goes live every Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on Facebook and YouTube, along with daily chats throughout the week on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure you click like and subscribe buttons so you can get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or, if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. So, grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Talk Cosmos is celebrating its 6th season and has a special gift for everyone listening to the show, a free mini transit reading from your natal chart. This reading can help you discover your life path forward and make you aware of current opportunities and challenges. Talk Cosmos Kaleidoscope Visions panel invites you to participate in this learning experience and to interact with the astrologers reading your chart in 2023 during the monthly Kaleidoscope Visions show. Schedule your mini transit reading and find more information about the panel at talkcosmos.com. We look forward to connecting with you for a free natal chart mini transit reading during the monthly Kaleidoscope Visions show at 1 p.m. Pacific on Talk Cosmos.
Get inspired every hour right here on Alternative Talk 1150.
Hi, and we're back. And I hadn't said, but the title of this is Balancing Justice for All. So, and I want Wendy you to show, but Nathan, can we go right back to the slides for a moment? Because I just wanted to show this one factor, Haumea. I didn't even spell it right there, pardon. But it's down here. It's a dwarf planet. It's way out past Pluto. And she is the Hawaiian goddess of birth. And exactly conjunct within 2 degrees of this Venus Star Point. Meaning, again, an echo of the deep transformation that is in process. And soon she'll go into Scorpio. So that's the same one. And you can see this weird little, it looks like, anyway, it's up here at 29 degrees. Okay, so I wanted to show that. And I'm just going to leave this up if people want to go back to it. It's Venus Star Points. It's from the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, and I think Wendy has one too that'll be very pertinent on hers. But it's a series, and you can see the replication. Like this is back from 2017 to 2025 for Aries, and with the Libra point that it was at 3 degrees, and now we're entering the 29 degrees of Libra because it goes backwards. It's a cycle that goes backwards. However, I'm going to delete that. So I'm not going to go into a lot of it. And I will mention too, just so they're up on the screen and people, because then we can go into Wendy's, that Ariel Gutman of SophiaVenus.com has a link that's on the slide where you can find your Venus Star Point. And then Wendy has also actually printed them out. But it's a very colorful one because we all have a Venus Star Point prior to our birth. And just like a natal eclipse. And the other thing is that this is a very interesting, in case you're interested, there's a mudra posture, that she has. It's only a few minutes long. That's recent. And it's on YouTube. And it shows where if you stand as the body with the head and the arms and the legs, the direction. So it's a little reference to go to. Okay, that's the end of mine.
Before maybe Wendy, you pull up your slides so we can talk about it with them up too. Just one of the things I think is interesting with this as we're shifting into Libra, right? We talked about it some, but so, if you're dealing with a 5-pointed star, but we only have 4 elements, you end up with repeated elements, right? And so with this particular star that we're moving into, so now we'll have 2 points of the star in air signs, and we have 2 in fire as well, and 1 in earth, because Scorpio's disappearing soon, right? And so until we get the next sign coming in, we'll end up with double fire and double air and no water briefly. Which is the Aries will shift into Pisces because it goes backwards through the zodiac. But so just even thinking about what are the elemental themes that we're shifting into. And so this air about communication and action really dominating this star that we're moving into with the double
powerful
elemental signatures going on.
And important to note where we've come from, like you say, but with even just having 2 stars ruled by Mars, with the Scorpio and Aries. So we've been living in this sort of very Martian sort of era, which is interesting,
Mm-hmm.
now, which now that's going to be a lot less so, isn't it, with the Libra? So it's again, so it's going to be quite a change, I think. Yeah.
Tremendous.
And
Absolutely.
positive. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with the archetype of Venus, of looking back into the history of Inanna, the descent of Inanna, which is Adam Ginsberg goes into a lot with the cycles because she is so regular. She's an evening star and then she's a morning star. I think, and it's that transformational inner self. It really gets, which is interesting, isn't it? Because Libra is an external, it's a yang, it's an external energy where we're relating ourselves with others as a mirror, or maybe the mirror isn't.
And that being part of this, that like we're talking about this Cazimi conjunction, which means she's invisible. The star is not visible at this time. We're in that now with it being combust. That meaning that the star, the planet, is rising and setting so close to the sun anywhere in the world that the star itself, that is the descent of Inanna, right? That's how the myths came about, is that suddenly the star disappeared because she's rising and setting so close to when the sun is that the rays of the sun outshine the brightness. As bright as Venus is, the brightest star in our solar system, she's sort of it's different than the Venus eclipse, but there is this sort of eclipsing of her light that happens during this time, in that at the same time that it's this merging of energy. Because often with clients, I've found that people who are born with a Venus conjunction, where we get much larger orb that we're talking about with the Venus Star Point, they can struggle to see their own Venus within themselves, see their own value, see their own beauty because of the combust signature. So that's part of this energy, even though there is this collective shift happening.
And with generation of people with Pluto in Libra, it will be, I think, quite a significant, which age group is like from 1970 to 1980.
Because I have it. I've got Pluto at 8.
Right.
So what, 73 or so.
And everyone born around the 20th to the 22nd of September, it's going to be, it's going to be on their sun, which is, fabulous too, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's also interesting. Like I know Venus is, we think of her as Aphrodite and things like that, or not necessarily that she's, we have these sort of associations with her and archetypes and that too. But she's also rules, she rules. Well, I shouldn't say she, but I say it in a archetypal sense, not necessarily in a gender. But in Taurus, like Venus also rules Taurus, and there we have, other myths in terms of, nature. I mean, in my own creation myth, in Polynesia, in Maori, in New Zealand, she is Papatūānuku, and she rules all things on the earth. And it's interesting, we're moving out of fire, Scorpio and Mars, and moving into Libra. And I just, be interesting to see what happens on a more planetary climate, saving the planet. And at 29 Libra, it's very desperate. It's a very interesting degree. I know it moves backwards, not forwards, but it's still a sort of, may have a lot to do with the planet and investment in it, perhaps.
Should we see some of your slides? Should you
Sure.
want to present? Okay. And thank you for that. I'm so glad to have the heritage, because there is much beyond the Greco-Roman that dovetails. And with Haumea right there, and as you were saying about the Polynesians, it is an inclusivity of birth, rebirth. Yes.
Yeah. So this is just an image of Venus, but this here it's similar to the one that you had on the rose, Sue, which is really beautiful, and also very Libran. It's and this is sort of, I guess, the turned inside out. This is the 5-pointed star that Venus makes with her orbit around the sun, and it's just quite a magical mandala. And this is noted in Mickelson's Tables of Planetary Phenomena book, an incredible book. But this was just an image I thought was fascinating. Yeah.
It is, particularly over that span of time, 1989
Yes,
to
sorry, yeah.
1993. It's a
Yeah.
Venus Vesta mandala, and it is quite. It's talking about the depth. It shows depth with it, not just a flat imagery. I love it.
Weaving, all that weaving. Yeah, it's
Yes,
lovely.
interesting.
And this really is just an example of what, I guess it's quite astronomical, but just to perhaps explain what this means, because it's the conjunctions that turn, the Venus from a morning star to an evening star. It's the conjunctions with the sun. And it's always, when Venus, when we say conjunction, it's when it's on the same, from our perspective on Earth, we see them in the same space in the cosmos. And there's two different types of conjunctions. Of course, there's a direct one when Venus is moving forward from our perspective on Earth. And then there's a one that looks like the Venus is going backwards. But of course, she's not. It's just from our perspective on Earth. It's a bit like being on a train and one passing, but going at different speeds. It's sort of like alters your perception. And when we have, and I don't mean to get into too astronomical and too technical, so just stop me, so if you. But
That's
the
right.
inferior conjunction, which you can see on the slide, is when Venus and the Sun, when Venus is making a retrograde conjunction. But that is when the Venus is between the Sun and Earth, and that is when she turns to a morning star. But it's when Venus is on the other side of the Sun, where we can't see her. And when the Sun is between Venus and Earth, and that's when she has a direct conjunction, and that is when Venus turns into an evening star, and when she's most comfortable there, because from our perspective, she doesn't look like she's going backwards. But you can study this later on the slide.
And it's beautiful to illustrate this, and I thank you. And I know some people have said, whether it's Gemini bread, I'm not sure, but exterior and interior, because I'm always working with these labels, but this is very true.
Exterior is superior and inferior is interior. Yeah, it's sort of yeah.
But there's also that thought that the morning Venus, like the Mayans and others, they give a different characteristic to that, maybe with the rebirth and somewhat of the initiation, you could call it warrior part, whereas the evening star that lasts longer in the sky has more of a wisdom, accrued from all of her knowledge. So thank you.
I've also seen, and read some, I believe, on this, of looking at, given that we've given 2 signs to Venus, right? Looking at the interior versus superior as the Tauran Libran manifestation of her is another, the interior
different faces of her.
Different, that's part of that. Morning star being more Taurian and evening star being more Libran.
Like a yin and a yang. You could look at it that way. There's so many ways to look at our signs. One is exterior, going out, the yang, the energizing, and the yin is more within and centered within. Well, good. Thank you. Let's see what else you have. I know there's a wonderful.
Well, this is really just the same sort of image that you had as well, Sue. This is just the direct conjunctions over the next 8 years, and this is where they're going to be, and this is what when they are. And I think it's just interesting to clock this, and also again, like what Venus point star anyone is born under, and how that fits with the rest of the chart and everything else. But this is just the conjunctions that you also had the retrograde ones on there, which is also important. And this creates the 8-year cycle. And then, of course, within that is the 100-year cycle, and then the 250, and then the 1250. And, as with everything in astrology, it's, it has, or astronomy, it's cycle within cycle within cycle.
And it can be really interesting for folks who are going to look at their own or maybe want to play with this, that when I was looking at it for myself, it was very clear that I needed to look at the dates that were the same. I born under an evening star Venus, that's the star I look at. Because when I looked at all the dates, they didn't correlate to significant parts of my life. When I looked at the evening star, every single year since I was born was significant under the evening star connection. But the morning star, I struggled to find what it related to.
Because I'm also an evening star person. Although then again, to add to this, I'm remembering we have that prenatal Venus Star Point.
But so I started with the prenatal, and then the next conjunction was my parents' divorce. But the in between that wasn't really much of any. It was like, well, my brother was born, but my parents' divorce, way more significant. Right. And then after that, boarding school. And after that, like really, really significant years of my life, in a way that the 4 years in between those 8 years, I was having to sort of find something, as opposed to I could have named those dates independent of looking at the conjunction.
And all about relationships. Oh, go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, because this has just sort of come into, astrologers' consciousness. Now we have computers, and now it's coming up. It's like, it's a really interesting and hot topic, isn't it? So
it is.
Yeah, there's not a lot of work done. So great, I find that interesting.
Particularly because, just to mention also, there is this 8-year cycle where it's actually broken into 4, where it goes ahead and then it goes behind it near that same center. So this is anyway, it's something to integrate. Goody. Here we have more information.
Just little points and notes, really. I mean, I have to say that, Ariel Gutman is a guru on this subject, and her book is fabulous. It's really big, and it's beautifully written, and she's, a great woman, and, she her work has really laid the groundwork for all of us going forward and understanding this. And I just like, she just notes that that it's coming up, and just through her work, there's some important points, like every time there is that conjunction in the same sign, it moves back 1 or 2 degrees every time it makes that conjunction. So that's how it sort of regresses or retrogrades back through, or not retrogrades, but goes back through the sign that it's in. 100 years in that sign, then 150 years not in that sign, basically. So a 250-year cycle, which takes us back to that 1771 that we were talking about earlier.
It's interesting. I was just thinking that particular fraction is 2/3, right? And there's so much of the earth that is 2/3 water. We are 2/3 water. I mean, it's a little 72% somewhere in there, but it's close to it. And here we have, if you look at 150 and 100, anyway, a little aside. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and here just really is the which is the same chart that you put up, Sue. So we discussed that, and really this is the where it arrives on the planet, where it arrives, and you can see here the Sun Venus point. So it doesn't matter. This is time zone it's not sensitive. So when that exact conjunction occurs, this is where we find that Sun Venus landing on the planet. And you can see here it sits on the midheaven. It sits on the midheaven, which runs straight through Moscow, partly through the Middle East, East Africa, arriving down in South Africa, hitting on Johannesburg roughly. And then on the other side, that is on the IC, where Sun Venus occurs on the MC is basically through parts of Alaska, which doesn't really hit much else. Although there is probably Hawaii. I don't know if that's all somewhere in Polynesia there. But even when it doesn't, when you see that MC line, you find things occurring in the ocean. There will be something that happens on one of these islands. We've been on the Thursday night webinars, we've been tracing Mars on ingresses, and this is where the volcanoes are going off around the planet. There's interesting stuff that you see, following these lines. And then when you look at the white lines here, this is where Sun Venus will be on the ascendant at the exact conjunction. And you'll see America is pulled into this quite a bit, as is Canada, but especially for America, because it comes straight through very close to Washington, the capital. So and you can see the same, in Australia, up on the West Coast, up through Tokyo as well. So you have this Washington, Tokyo. So it means that they're the players in how this unfolds, whether that be art, music, industry, commerce. But it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting because as much as this line with the ascendant going through Alaska, so it's barely touching land, it just made me think, I don't know if anyone listening has started watching, there's a new television show that just premiered this fall with Hilary Swank. And it takes place in Alaska. And at least she's a journalist, and the entry point into the beginning of the show is she's brought to Alaska to start covering the disappearance of Indigenous women.
Ah, wonderful.
Oh, that's a powerful.
Which is this huge topic that doesn't get enough actual news coverage in this country. And missing and murdered Indigenous women in North America. It's a huge. What's
it called, Laura? Sorry,
I think it's called Alaska Times. But yeah, I just saw the second episode. But it's the big story they're covering is trying to figure out what's happening, at least to these women in Alaska that are Indigenous, and they're covering this story that's not getting enough actual attention in the news in this country. That
brings to mind.
And here's this line that's all about women and justice going through.
Perfect.
So it's just an interesting manifestation of this.
Yeah, because justice is Libra, but also it's Jupiterian, and I'm thinking of Jupiter in Aries in that new chart, which is retrograde, looking at what we've missed, the voice. Jupiter needs to have a voice, and in Aries, it's going to have to be starting something fresh. So this is just an indication, as you said, it's a little prelude to it. But the diversity, along with Mars, everywhere, is there'll be many voices. So I really appreciate this. It's powerful.
And it's interesting because the Jupiter at 0-1 degrees Aries is actually going to be quincunx by aspect or in conjunct. That exact Libra Venus, Libra Sun Venus conjunction. So it's a quincunx. So it's and Laura, you just described the struggle. It sort of describes that. The quincunx. So that's Yeah. I think that's
looking at, and this Brazil, I'm thinking of the rainforest. If you were mentioning about nature, and then of course the ocean, we already know that there's, at least here in the United States, of course we're in Hawaii, but over there's all these hurricanes. And of course we have climate change where the temperature is more extreme, and it meaning extreme weather. So it's not just on the land. It's very important to realize.
Yeah, that's that conjunction, the sort of the Taurian side of Venus, and that quincunx to Jupiter is, interesting. In Aries, also, just thinking of that, and, when Laura was talking about the elements and also having an Aries Scorpio sign, it's, we've had a lot of fires around the world, and there's and with it quincunx Jupiter as well, there's it's hopefully through struggle comes resolution in some way, but it could also highlight that too.
Well, we have a few minutes. Oh my goodness. And of course people it's
it's a lot to cover. I think for people to just sort of start playing with and looking at